This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace.
If you're like me, you find it fascinating listening to other photographers, and in this case street photographers, talk about how they think about the work that they do. When they go out and shoot, the decisions they make for and against particular things, what they want their work to communicate or say, and how over time, as they shoot more and more, they define a style that's recognizable as theirs. In my last video, I said that this year I want to experiment with shooting more videos with other photographers as well, because I feel like I'm not doing you any favors if I only show you my work and I tell you my way of thinking about things. I'm putting this photography journey for you in my box, and I don't want to do that. I want to expose you to other people and how they think as well. So hopefully in the aggregate of all this, you can see that there's many different ways to think about doing things, and then you can make decisions for your own work as you define your style. So in that spirit, today I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Joshua Jackson. Joshua and I only met about a year ago, but in that time we built one of those friendships which are the sort where, you know, artists journey together and we talk a lot about our own work. We don't need to agree about everything. We don't need to see the world or the way that we shoot the same way, but those conversations we have every couple of weeks together over coffee, and when we go out and shoot together and we just talk as we're walking around, I find so valuable in being able to bounce thoughts off somebody, hear their thoughts, and in that mix, that soup of ideas that we chuck around between us, good stuff comes out, and both our work hopefully grows because of it. I always have to remind myself that Joshua's only been shooting street photography for a couple of years now, which will shock you when you see his images because they already feel like they have such a recognizable style and the work itself feels so mature. And I think that's testament to the fact that Joshua thinks really deeply about the work that he does. He's not lazy about any part of it. He's constantly mulling things over. He's gone back and he's read the history of street photography, and he knows way more than I do about that because he wants to look at the work the greats have done, not just copy them, but take the next step forward for photography. And he knows the city incredibly well that he works in. He walks it obsessively and notices every fine detail. And I think all of these things and the hours that he puts into shooting means that he's quickly honed a style that he can call his own. There are two things you'll notice immediately about Joshua's work, and the first is the beautiful, rich and vibrant and consistent color theme he pulls through all his images, especially this theme of deep saturated reds that really make the images pop off the page. And the second thing is you'll notice if you look closely that the subjects in all his images are very rarely clearly visible. They're usually hidden somehow. They're in shadow, or they're a silhouette, or they're being shot through some kind of translucent material or through a reflection, because he doesn't want you to clearly see who he's shooting. And when we were out in the street the other day, I was asking him about this and why he does this. And he shared this great concept with me that he's found called the curiosity gap, which he uses as sort of a rubric for his work and a bit of a loose direction about how he wants to capture people on the street. And I found it such an interesting idea, I thought I needed to take cameras and let him tell me to camera so I could share it with all of you. So I will keep quiet now. I'll catch up with you at the end of the video, and let Joshua speak for himself.
I started shooting at night initially because I struggled a bit during the day. I mean, when it's daylight, everything's a potential photo opportunity, and sometimes it's quite hard to know where to focus your time and attention, whereas at night time, the only things that you have to work with are the light sources. So in a way, you're a little bit like a moth, and you're kind of drawn towards those. You investigate those light sources, see what the opportunities are, and then you maybe move on if there's nothing happening.
So you're kind of looking for light first, and then you're waiting for subjects to be in that space with a good light, but it's light first for you.
Yeah, so my approach at night is almost the complete reverse of what's happening during the day. So during the day I'm very subject driven, generally, and then at night time it's about the light, and then whatever happens within that space is just up to chance.
So like when I look at your Instagram, the colours are really striking. Do you kind of think about looking for colours the same way you think about looking for light?
Yeah, colour's really important to me, and I find that it helps tell the story that I want to tell in a way, which is living in a vibrant multicultural city such as London, and you know, the colours kind of reflect that in some way. And I find that also it's another way it adds another layer to the photo for the viewer to interpret. So knowing a little bit of colour theory can help to have a gut feeling as to what will work and what won't. But also it's interesting getting feedback from people who have looked at your images that are in colour, and people have different takeaways based on their thoughts, feelings and ideas associated with those colours. So red is something that appears in my photos quite a lot. And to some people that could mean love or passion, and to others it could mean war and anger. So I think just having that extra layer of colour can bring something else to the image. I think when I head out on the streets of London, I always have an open mind about what I'm going to see or even where I'm going to go, and I always have no fixed expectation. But I try and look for anything that's slightly out of the ordinary or something that we wouldn't normally see every day, and I try and tap into the things that people would generally overlook. So it could be just a small detail and try and form an image around that. And one thing that I'm doing a lot at the moment is I'm incorporating temporary things into my photos to create kind of unrepeatable moments. So it could be a temporary light source from some car headlights. It could be a window display on Oxford Street in London. It could be a construction hoarding, just like we have here. I mean, this is going to be gone in a couple of months, and if you can create photos out of these opportunities, then it creates things that could be more unique and unrepeatable. So that's something I'm doing a lot. I took a photo in Soho about a year and a half ago, incorporating like a temporary window vinyl, which I was really happy with. I went back the next day and the vinyl had been removed, and it's a photo that I could never ever repeat again.
We were walking through Chinatown the other day and you pointed out a dustpan and brush on a step, which you've shot a few times, which to most people would seem like quite a random object. Why shoot that? I
enjoy the temporary nature of it. So I walk through Chinatown every single day and past this particular supermarket, and there's always a dustpan and brush lent against the wall. And every single day, the way it's been left or put down is different. And it just so happens one day the light was hitting it and I knew it was a photo that I had to take. So I guess it's the kind of temporary nature of the photo that really jumped out to me. But I know it's just a dustpan and brush, but also I suppose there's maybe a sense of time and place there as well. And also I'm a big believer that you can see the character of a place and the street through things other than people. When I was designing my website, I was reading quite a lot about marketing, and one of the concepts that I stumbled across was something called the curiosity gap. And it's something that marketers and filmmakers will be very familiar with, but it's also something that we as photographers can use to drive our work forward. And essentially the curiosity gap is creating a hole or a space that the viewer needs to fill in some way. You drive the desire in them to want to learn more. And what we can do as photographers, and what I certainly try to do, is hold some of the information back from the viewer that pushes them to lean in to learn more about what's going on. There's a bunch of different ways that we can create curiosity gaps in our photos. My personal favourite is using abstraction. So in wintertime in London, there's a lot of windows with condensation on them, and we can be creative with our focus to create a sense of mystery in the image as to what's going on for the viewer. We can also play around with shutter speeds, so we could use slow shutter speeds to have a sense of motion. We could use silhouettes, we could use deep shadows, and we could even use things like double exposures. But essentially what we're doing is to try to mask the obvious from the viewer.
A lot of people are obsessed with, finding an interesting subject and just shooting the sharpest possible photograph they can of that subject. But you subvert that and almost do the opposite on purpose and try and mask the subject. So what's the philosophy behind it? What's the why behind that?
Well, in street photography, there's lots of different styles and approaches. So there are people that do humour and juxtaposition, and they do it fantastically, and I admire that style and approach. There's also people that do kind of documentary, reportage style, and then there's people like myself that are probably more form-driven. We lean on abstraction to create those kind of curiosity gaps for the viewer. And I guess selfishly, I find it more of a challenge. It forces me to look at things differently. It forces me to think more deeply about how I can compose photos and project something that's a little bit more unfamiliar. And also, I want to create photos that I want to hang on my wall as well. And that just happens to be the stuff that speaks to me. It may not speak to you. And also, I want to challenge the viewer a little bit more as well. I want to maybe create photos that force them to think a little bit more deeply, to stay with it. And if we think about comedians, I prefer more of the storyteller. So the punchline takes longer to deliver, but if you stay with it, then ultimately it's more rewarding.
Now, every photographer shoots differently, and the point isn't to try and go out there now and rip off Joshua's style, because at the end of the day, you'll just be a pale imitation of what he's trying to do. Instead, I hope what's inspired you is listening to another photographer's why he chooses to do what he does, and why he captures the way that he does, and what he wants to say with those images. Hopefully, it challenges you to think about your why. Why do you shoot what you shoot the way that you shoot, and what do you want to say with it? It's certainly challenged me. Let me give you some specifics. One of the ways Joshua challenges me is he reminds me I don't work hard enough. I went out on the streets with Joshua in Soho about a month ago, and we met up about 4 o'clock in the afternoon as the light was coming down here in winter, and we started walking around and shooting and taking shots. Probably got to about 10 o'clock. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna head home now, so I'm gonna walk down to the bus. And he walked down to the bus with me, and I said, you're not heading back as well? He's like, no, I'm staying out for a while. And I said, well, what time do you head back? And he said, well, probably when the sun comes up, maybe about 6, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's easy to dismiss someone like Joshua as he's just naturally talented. He's only been doing street photography for 2 years, and look how good he is already. It must be innate in him, so I don't have to work that hard because I could never reach that because he's just so naturally good. But that's not the truth at all in his case. He works so hard, so many hours and hours of walking around in the cold on his own with sore feet, taking terrible image after terrible image that gets him to those absolutely brilliant images that he produces. We can't use innate talent as an excuse with Joshua. You have to look at him and respect his work ethic. Another interesting thing about Joshua is even with that crazy work ethic and hour upon hour trudging through the streets taking images, he says he probably only gets about 2 images a month that he's really happy with. And that really challenges me because I do things quite differently. I go out a few times a week, take a bunch of shots, pick the best ones, edit them up, and I try and post 1 image a day to Instagram. That's 365 images a year. Now, there is no ways they can all be of the standard that Joshua is talking about with those 2 images. And it's got me thinking that it's fine to do what I'm doing with Instagram. It keeps me shooting, it keeps me posting. But I should also have that other tier. Like if I presented my 20 best images to you, it would look very, very different from just scrolling down my Instagram feed. And I should always have that upper echelon, those different levels to the way that I'm thinking about my images. But there's no substitute for getting out the door with a camera in hand. I get so many photographers getting hold of me saying, Sean, I'm really struggling to define my style. I don't know what I want to say and how I want to say it. And I often push back and say, well, what are you shooting and how often are you shooting it? And the response is too often, well, you know, I don't really have the motivation to shoot very much because I don't know what my style is. I'm not sure what people expect, but let me tell you, it's not going to happen that you're going to sit at home and have hand-delivered in your brain some pre-packaged style that you can just get out the door and shoot with straight away. That's not how it works. The only way you can define a style is by getting out the door with your camera, by taking tons of bad images and walking miles with sore feet and coming home with nothing day after day until you get 1 or 2 images that give you a glimmer of hope, and you start to build a style around those. And let me warn you, that won't be your style. You'll choose against that in a year's time, and you'll slowly change direction again and again. And in all this mess, in all these hours, all this sore feet and walking around and feeling like you're not getting anywhere, a style will emerge. But I don't know another way to do it than to just put in the time. And another thing Joshua challenges me on is if I want to be a decent street photographer, I have to get to know my city intimately. Walking around with Joshua is amazing. It's like getting a tour of your own city, but of all the crazy little mundane tiny details that people walk past every day. He points out all these little minutiae, like so-and-so will stand on this corner every day and she wears a blue coat with red buttons on it. And if you stand by this shop here, every half an hour they bring rubbish bags through that door with the shiny metal on it. He knows all these tiny little details. He can feel the rhythm of the city just because he spent so much time walking it. And he's not out to try and travel the world and shoot tons of different cities. He's honing in on London and to get to know her so intimately that he can capture her intimately. And that intimacy definitely for me comes through in the work that he produces. Like many great street photographers, he reminds me that the best images aren't at the end of an expensive flight and staying in expensive hotels. They are probably just round the corner from your house if you pick up the camera and take the time to go, to stay, to walk around and to see what's really going on. So I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at Joshua's work and his way of thinking, and that it's challenged you in your own work. Make sure to go across to Instagram and follow him at JoshKJack. I'm also going to put a link to his website down below so you can go and dig in and find out more about him if you want to. Just to let you know that I will be in Amsterdam next weekend. I might do some sort of meetup there, I'm thinking, if there's enough people who are keen. So follow me on Instagram. I'll put my link at the end as well, and I'll announce something there and we'll meet at a point and just walk around the streets and have a chat and shoot some images together. Also, thank you so much to those of you who have bought books. It's nuts, but after 2 weeks, I'm already down to under half stock. So if you were thinking about buying, make sure you buy soon because they'll probably all be gone. I won't be printing previous years. Once this lot is gone, think of them as limited editions. They are finished, and the next time a book will come around will be in January of 2020. And thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself for years, long before they were a sponsor on this channel. This year has been great with them just because selling books from my website was something I was quite anxious about. Was it going to be too complicated to keep track of orders and inventory and all the rest of it? But it's built into the back end of Squarespace. So apart from the fact that if you're a photographer, their designs really make your work look good. If you sell any kind of product, they make it really, really easy for you to keep track of orders coming in and print labels and check on where your inventory's at and keep track of money coming in. It really couldn't be simpler.
Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.